Translate it, janitor, and I'll wire you $1 million before lunch. The laughter hit the glass walls before the words even settled, sharp and polished like the boardroom itself. Ava Brooks stopped pushing her mop beside the conference room door, her fingers tightening around the handle as 20 pairs of eyes slid toward her like she had just wandered into the wrong world. 42 floors above Manhattan, inside Caldwell Dynamics' executive suite, the air smelled like fresh espresso, leather chairs, and expensive impatience. Ethan Caldwell stood at the head of the 12-foot walnut table, his charcoal suit pressed so sharply it looked carved into him. At 47, he had the kind of face business magazines called visionary, and employees called terrifying when he wasn't around. Across from him sat 3 executives from Tokyo, their dark briefcases open, their expressions unreadable, while a stack of foreign contracts sat in the center of the table like loaded weapons. Ava had been wiping fingerprints off the glass wall when Ethan noticed her name tag and smirked. "You understand Japanese, right?" he asked, glancing at the badge clipped to her faded blue janitor uniform. A few people chuckled. Ava froze. Her badge read A. Brooks. Nothing else. Ethan slid one contract across the polished wood and tapped it twice with his silver pen. "Go ahead," he said. "Translate it. Unless the mop is your only skill." More laughter. Quiet, expensive laughter. Ava looked at the paper. The black ink glimmered under the recessed lights. Her pulse moved slow, steady, almost detached, but inside her chest something old stirred awake. She knew this room. Not this exact room, but rooms like it. Rooms where people in tailored suits confused status with intelligence. Rooms her father used to bring her into when she was 10, back when he taught linguistics at Columbia and believed language could save lives. That was before cancer took him. Before medical debt took everything else. Before Ava traded lecture halls for night shifts and cleaning supplies. Ethan leaned back, folding his arms. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Too complicated?" One of the Japanese investors exchanged a glance with his legal advisor. Ava noticed it. Tiny. Fast. Almost invisible. But she caught it. Because 20 minutes earlier, while polishing the hallway windows, she had overheard enough of the conversation through the half-open doors to know this wasn't just translation. It was negotiation. And something about the phrasing had bothered her. Something buried under polite smiles and technical jargon. Ava stepped forward, setting the mop against the wall. The wheels squeaked once against the marble floor. The room quieted. She lifted the contract with careful hands and scanned the first page, her eyes moving faster than anyone expected. Ethan's smirk widened. He expected hesitation. Embarrassment. Maybe silence. Instead, Ava stopped at line 7 and looked up. Her voice came out calm. Clear. Sharp enough to split the room in half. "This doesn't say partnership," she said. "It says transfer of controlling authority under emergency arbitration." The room went still. One of the Japanese executives straightened immediately. Ethan's smile faltered. Ava lowered her eyes back to the page. "And if you sign page 4, she added, "you're not expanding your company." She looked directly at Ethan now. "You're handing it over." For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. Not the executives. Not the investors. Not even Ethan Caldwell. The silence stretched across the boardroom like ice over dark water, thin and dangerous. Ava Brooks kept her eyes on the contract, her heartbeat steady now, grounded by something stronger than fear. Across the table, one of the Japanese executives, Kenji Watanabe, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, his polished cufflinks catching the overhead light. His expression had changed. Not angry. Not amused. Alert. Ethan's silver pen tapped once against the wood, slower now. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice flatter than before. Ava lifted the page and pointed to a block of text halfway down. "Section 4, paragraph 2, she said. "The phrase they translated as emergency support rights is not support. It is authority transfer under legal crisis conditions. If your company faces litigation, they can assume operational control. The company's head legal officer, Mark Reynolds, frowned and grabbed his own copy. His eyes moved line by line, his forehead tightening. Ethan looked at him. Is that true? Mark did not answer right away. That bothered Ethan more than if he had answered immediately. Ava noticed the shift in the room. 20 seconds ago, she had been invisible. Now every eye tracked her like gravity had changed. Kenji folded his hands neatly. Your janitor has impressive comprehension, he said carefully. His English was smooth, but Ava heard the tension underneath it. She knew that tone. The tone of someone realizing the quiet person in the room understood far more than expected. Ethan narrowed his eyes at Ava. Where did you learn Japanese? Ava swallowed once. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the paper, grounding herself. My father taught comparative linguistics, she said. Japanese, Mandarin, Arabic, French. He believed language was power. Ethan looked at her uniform, the cleaning cart by the wall, the rubber gloves hanging from the side. Nothing about her fit the answer. And now you clean floors? He asked. The question carried less mockery this time, but the sting was still there. Ava held his gaze. Bills do not care about degrees. That landed harder than anyone expected. Mark suddenly stopped turning pages. His face lost color. He looked up at Ethan. She is right. The words dropped into the room like a stone. Ethan's jaw tightened. What? Mark pushed his chair back and leaned over the contract. This clause transfers controlling equity if there is any legal dispute during the merger. It is buried under international compliance language. If we signed this... He stopped. He did not have to finish. Ethan stared at the paper like it had changed shape in his hands. Across the table, Kenji remained still, but Ava caught it again, the slight tightening near his mouth. A crack in the mask. Ethan stood up slowly, chair sliding against hardwood. His 6'2" frame cast a long shadow across the table. But this time, his size did not control the room. The contract did, and the woman in janitor blues standing beside it. Ethan looked at Ava differently now, not like staff, not like background noise, but like a problem he did not understand. Ava lowered the contract carefully, but inside, old memories pressed against her chest. Her father's study. Books stacked floor to ceiling. Flashcards in 3 languages taped to kitchen cabinets. Nights spent translating newspapers just for practice. She had buried that life years ago under debt, grief, and survival. But standing there now, under white lights and executive eyes, she realized something painful. She had never lost it. She had only stopped being seen. Ethan Caldwell did not sit back down. He stayed standing at the end of the table, one hand flat against the polished walnut surface, staring at the contract as if the paper itself had betrayed him. The skyline behind him glowed silver through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretching for miles beneath a gray afternoon sky, but nobody in the room was looking at the city anymore. Every eye was locked on Ava Brooks. Mark Reynolds adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. I missed it, he admitted, his voice low. For a man who had spent 22 years in corporate law, those 3 words sounded heavier than any apology. Ethan's gaze shifted sharply toward Kenji Watanabe. Was this intentional? He asked. The room tightened. Kenji remained calm, but the confidence in his posture had changed. His shoulders were not as loose now. His fingers pressed together with more force than before. It is standard language in our market, Kenji said. Perhaps there was misunderstanding. Ava heard it immediately. Not the words. The hesitation. The careful distance in them. Ethan heard it too. He turned back to Ava. Read the next page, he said. It was no longer a joke. No smirk. No challenge. Just command. Ava looked at the second page. Her throat tightened. The room felt smaller now, heavier. She was still wearing rubber-soled work shoes on imported Italian flooring. Her cleaning cart stood against the wall like a reminder of where she belonged, at least according to everyone here. But the paper in her hands felt familiar. Like muscle memory. Like home. She turned the page. Her eyes moved through the legal phrasing, through the layered politeness, through the hidden weight inside carefully chosen words. Then she stopped. There is another problem, she said quietly. Mark looked up immediately. Ethan's face hardened. What now? Ava tapped the lower paragraph. This section gives them access to your software patents under temporary review rights. Mark leaned over her shoulder. His eyes widened. That is impossible. Ava shook her head. No. It is right there. Mark read it twice, then a third time. The room had gone so quiet the hum of the air conditioning sounded loud. Ethan rubbed his jaw slowly, processing. How much would that cost us? He asked. Mark answered without looking up. If the patents transfer under review and they replicate the systems. He stopped and looked directly at Ethan. Billions. Ethan exhaled hard through his nose. Not anger. Calculation. Realization. Ava could feel it now, the gravity shifting harder. This was not one bad clause. It was a trap built in layers. Kenji's legal advisor finally spoke, his voice careful. This is normal international structure. Ava looked up from the contract and answered before Ethan could. No, it is not. Her voice was calm, but sharper now. It is layered asset extraction disguised as cooperative risk management. Mark looked at her, stunned. Ethan looked at her too, but differently now. Not like an employee. Not even like an outsider. Like someone standing in the center of his empire holding knowledge his own team had missed. Ethan stepped closer. Who are you, Ava? It was a simple question, but it carried something heavier beneath it. Ava hesitated. For a moment she saw her apartment in Queens. 700 square feet. Rent overdue. Her mother's hospital bills stacked on the kitchen table. Her father's framed degree collecting dust beside unpaid notices. 2 master's degrees. 4 languages. Night shifts and bleach stains. A life folded smaller than it should have been. She looked back at Ethan. Someone who reads carefully, she said. Mark closed the contract and sat back slowly. We need to stop this deal immediately. Ethan nodded once, but his eyes stayed on Ava. The $1 million joke from 20 minutes ago was gone now, buried under something far more unsettling. Respect. And maybe something else. Regret. Because for the first time since Ava Brooks had walked these hallways pushing a mop, Ethan Caldwell realized the smartest person in the room had never been sitting at the table. The meeting ended without signatures. That alone was enough to shake the building. For Caldwell Dynamics, deals did not stop once they reached the boardroom. They closed. Fast. Clean. Final. But now the contracts sat untouched in the center of the table, their pages spread open like evidence. Kenji Watanabe and his team gathered their papers in silence, their polished movements tighter than before. No smiles. No handshakes. Just brief nods and quiet exits. The heavy glass doors shut behind them with a soft click, but the sound felt louder than it should have. Ethan Caldwell stood still, staring at the empty chairs they left behind. Billions of dollars had almost slipped through his fingers, hidden behind elegant wording and international courtesy. Mark Reynolds stacked the papers carefully, his hands less steady now. I want a full audit on every line, Ethan said. His voice was calm, but colder than before. Mark nodded immediately. I will have the legal team start now. Ethan looked toward Ava. She was already reaching for her mop again, like the last 20 minutes had not happened. Like she had not just saved his company from a disaster nobody else saw coming. That unsettled him more than the contract itself. Wait. Ava stopped. The single word held the room still. Ethan walked around the table, each step measured against the hardwood floor. Up close, Ava could see the details people never noticed from far away. The faint lines near his eyes. The sleepless weight beneath them. The sharp control in the way he carried himself, like letting go of it would cost him everything. How many languages? He asked. Ava hesitated. For fluently. Too conversational. Ethan stared at her, searching for something. Maybe arrogance. Maybe performance. But Ava had neither. Only stillness. Mark shook his head in disbelief. And you are cleaning executive floors? Ava gave a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Cleaning pays every Friday. Ethan glanced at the contract again. You knew before you walked in there. Ava did not answer right away. Outside the windows, rain had started tapping softly against the glass, streaking the skyline in gray lines. I heard enough while working the hallway, she said finally. The phrasing felt wrong. Ethan folded his arms. So you listened? Ava met his eyes. No. I noticed. That answer landed differently. Mark looked between them, seeing something shift that had nothing to do with contracts anymore. Ethan looked at Ava's janitor cart. The spray bottle. The folded towels. The yellow caution sign hanging off the side. The symbols of a life that no longer made sense to him. What degrees do you have? He asked. Ava's fingers tightened around the mop handle. That question hurt in ways he could not see. Masters in Linguistics. Masters in International Business Translation. Mark stared at her. From where? Columbia. The room went silent again. Ethan blinked once. Why are you here? Ava looked down for a second, then back up. Because my father got sick. Then my mother. Then life got expensive. No pity in her voice. Just fact. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing it. For years he had built an empire by measuring people fast. Value, speed, usefulness. But standing in front of Ava Brooks, he realized his system had missed something enormous. Not because it was hidden. Because he never looked. Mark gathered the contracts and headed toward the door. I will call legal. Ethan stopped him. No. Mark turned. Ethan's eyes stayed on Ava. Call strategy too. Mark frowned. Strategy? Ethan nodded once. Because if she could see this in 10 minutes, I want to know what else she can see. Ava felt the weight of those words settle in the room like thunder waiting to break. For the first time in years, the door in front of her was not the service exit. It was something else entirely. And neither of them knew what would happen when it opened. The strategy room on the 39th floor was smaller than the boardroom, but somehow felt heavier. No polished smiles. No foreign investors. Just numbers, projections, and consequences. Ava Brooks stood near the doorway, her janitor cart left outside in the hallway like a forgotten life waiting for her return. Inside, Ethan Caldwell sat at the head of a narrow oak table while 6 senior executives and 3 attorneys flipped through revised copies of the contract. Rain tapped against the windows harder now, the gray afternoon fading toward evening, the city lights beginning to flicker alive below. Mark Reynolds adjusted his glasses and looked toward Ava. Walk us through everything you saw. Ava hesitated. This was different. Before, she had spoken because she had to. Now she was being invited into the machine itself. Ethan noticed her pause. Sit down, he said. Ava looked at the empty leather chair halfway down the table. Nobody offered that seat to janitors. Not here. Not ever. But Ethan's eyes stayed on her, waiting. Slowly Ava sat. The leather felt strange beneath her work uniform, her cleaning gloves still tucked into her back pocket. Mark opened the contract. Start with page 1. Ava leaned forward, her eyes scanning the text again, but now the room watched differently. Not with amusement. With need. She explained the language carefully, breaking down phrases hidden behind corporate politeness. Transfer rights disguised as support. Patent exposure hidden under compliance review. Arbitration terms tilted to benefit the foreign partner in every possible dispute. Every time she spoke, another executive scribbled notes. Every explanation made the room colder. Ethan stayed silent, listening. Really listening. Then halfway through page 6 Ava stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Mark noticed immediately. What is it? Ava tapped the margin. This timestamp. Mark leaned in. What about it? Ava looked at him. It was edited yesterday. Ethan frowned. And? Ava pointed lower. After your legal department signed off. Mark's face tightened. He checked the digital record attached to the draft. His fingers moved faster now across his tablet. 10 seconds passed. Then 15. Then he froze. She is right. Ethan's voice dropped. What does that mean? Mark looked up, pale. Somebody altered the agreement after internal approval. The room shifted instantly. One executive stood up. Another cursed under his breath. Ethan's jaw locked hard enough Ava could see the tension near his temple. This was no longer negotiation. This was sabotage. Ethan stood and looked around the table. Who had access? Mark swallowed. Legal. Strategy. Executive review. Ethan's eyes darkened. That meant someone inside his company had opened the door. Ava leaned back slowly, feeling the weight of it settle over the room. She had thought she was uncovering a bad deal. But this was bigger. Someone had helped build the trap. Ethan turned toward Ava again. How did you catch the timestamp? Ava blinked. The formatting changed. Different punctuation spacing. Different syntax rhythm. One of the executives stared at her. You saw that in seconds? Ava nodded once. Language leaves fingerprints. Nobody laughed this time. Ethan looked down at the contract, then at the people around him. For the first time all day, his voice carried something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Lock every version of this deal. Freeze all internal access. Mark nodded and rushed out to call compliance. The others followed, their expensive shoes moving fast against the hardwood, their calm replaced by urgency. Within seconds, the room was nearly empty. Just Ethan and Ava remained. The rain hit the glass harder now, blurring the city into streaks of silver and white. Ethan stood at the window, staring out over Manhattan, his reflection faint in the glass. I almost signed it, he said quietly. Ava looked at the contract in front of her, pages that had almost changed everything. But you did not. Ethan turned toward her, the weight of those words settling between them. For the first time in a very long time, Ethan Caldwell realized his company had enemies inside its walls. And the person who uncovered them had been pushing a mop just 1 hour earlier. The strategy room emptied fast, leaving behind scattered papers, half-finished coffee, and the kind of silence that only comes after something nearly catastrophic. Ava Brooks stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind her, the click soft against the growing storm outside. The corridor. Lights reflected across the polished marble like long strips of white fire, and for the first time all day, her hands began to shake. Not from fear. From release. She walked past the executive elevators, past framed magazine covers with Ethan Caldwell's face on them, past walls of glass that made the city feel close enough to touch. Then she stopped inside the employee restroom at the far end of the floor. The room was empty. Cold tile. Bright fluorescent light. The hum of ventilation above. Ava leaned against the sink and looked at herself in the mirror. Same uniform. Same tired eyes. Same woman who had walked into work 6 hours earlier expecting bleach stains and empty trash bins. But everything felt different now. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, like someone she used to know. She turned on the faucet and let cold water run over her hands. The sound filled the silence. For a moment it took her back. Her father at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, translating newspaper headlines into 3 languages just to teach her precision. Words are never random, Ava, he used to say. People hide truth inside language because they think nobody will look closely. She used to laugh at that. Back then, the apartment smelled like coffee and old books, and the future felt wide open. Now it smelled like hand soap and floor cleaner, and the future had narrowed into bills, rent, and survival. Ava dried her hands slowly and sat on the small bench by the lockers. Her body felt heavy. Not tired. Just aware. Aware that in one afternoon, She had stepped back into a part of herself she thought was gone forever. A soft knock at the restroom door interrupted the silence. "Miss Brooks?" It was Lisa Moreno from Human Resources, her voice careful through the door. Ava stood. "Yes?" Lisa stepped inside, holding a tablet against her chest. Her expression looked awkward, almost apologetic. "Mr. Caldwell asked me to find you." Ava's stomach tightened. "Why?" Lisa hesitated. "Compliance found something." Ava's chest went still. "What kind of something?" Lisa lowered her voice. "The edit trail. The contract changes came from inside executive strategy." Ava stared at her. That meant someone very close to Ethan had been involved. Not an assistant. Not an intern. Someone powerful enough to touch merger documents after approval. Lisa shifted her weight. "He wants you back upstairs." Ava glanced at the mirror again. At the blue uniform. At the ID badge clipped to her collar. Hours ago, that badge made her invisible. Now it felt like a spotlight. "Did they find who did it?" Ava asked. Lisa looked down at the tablet. "Not yet. But whoever it was used a direct executive access code." Ava felt her pulse slow, sharp, and focused again. This was no longer just about translation or contracts. This was betrayal at the top floor of a billion-dollar company. She stood, smoothing the front of her uniform out of habit, even though there was no dust left on it. Lisa stepped aside at the door. The hallway outside looked longer now, quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath. Ava walked toward the elevators, the sound of her shoes tapping against marble steady and deliberate. Above her, 40 floors of glass and steel carried the weight of secrets. And somewhere near the top, someone was waiting to find out just how much the janitor had seen. The elevator climbed in silence, floor numbers glowing one by one above Ava Brooks like a countdown she could feel in her chest. 35. 36. 37. By the time the doors opened on the executive floor, the rain outside had turned into a full storm, streaking the massive glass walls and silver rivers. Lisa Moreno walked 2 steps ahead, her heels sharp against the marble, her face tight with the kind of tension that spreads fast inside corporate walls. The entire floor felt different now. Phones ringing. Doors half open. People moving faster than usual. No casual conversations. No easy smiles. Something had broken open. Ava followed Lisa into Ethan Caldwell's private office, a room larger than her entire apartment in Queens. Dark wood shelves lined one wall, filled with awards, market reports, framed photos of company launches and magazine covers. The city stretched behind Ethan in a wall of glass, lightning flickering far over the Hudson River. Mark Reynolds was already there, standing beside the conference table, his tie loosened now, a laptop open in front of him. Ethan stood with both hands on the table, staring at the screen. He looked up when Ava entered. "Close the door," he said. Lisa did. Ethan turned the laptop toward Ava. "Look at this." On the screen was the internal edit log. Rows of timestamps. User credentials. File access trails. Ava stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the entries. She saw it immediately. A pattern. Not in the names. In the timing. "These edits were staged," she said. Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" Ava pointed. "The changes happened in exact 7-minute intervals. That is not normal editing. That is controlled insertion." Mark looked closer, his eyes widening. Ethan folded his arms. "And?" Ava traced the sequence down the screen. "Whoever did this wanted the edits to blend into routine review cycles. But the spacing is too clean." Mark shook his head slowly. "That means planning." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Can you tell who?" Ava scanned lower. Then she stopped. A small detail. A hidden metadata tag attached to the final revision. Her breath caught. "This account." Mark leaned in. "What?" Ava looked at Ethan. "It was routed through executive proxy access." Ethan's eyes sharpened. Only 3 people have that. Mark swallowed hard. You, me, and Daniel Mercer. The room froze. Daniel Mercer. Ethan's chief strategy officer. His oldest executive partner. 12 years inside the company. The man who built half their expansion deals. Ethan stared at the name like it had become foreign overnight. That is not possible, Ethan said quietly. Mark looked pale. The system does not lie. Ava looked back at the metadata trail. Something still felt wrong. Then she saw it. A language marker hidden in the coding comments. Japanese shorthand notation. Not standard corporate formatting. Her stomach dropped. It is bigger than Daniel, she said. Ethan looked at her sharply. What? Ava pointed at the code comments. He did not build this alone. Whoever inserted this new Japanese legal syntax at native level. Mark went still. The investors. Ava nodded. Inside and outside. Ethan turned away, walking toward the glass window, rain rattling against it harder now. Betrayal from a competitor was business. Betrayal from inside was something else entirely. He stood there for a long moment, city lights reflecting across the glass like fractured stars. Then he turned back toward Ava. His face looked different now. Stripped down. Honest. You just exposed a corporate takeover and an internal betrayal in less than 2 hours. Ava said nothing. Ethan stepped closer, the storm light cutting shadows across the room. And I almost laughed you out of that boardroom. The weight of that truth sat between them heavier than the storm outside. Mark closed the laptop slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. If she had stayed quiet, Caldwell Dynamics would have been gone by next quarter. Ethan looked at Ava, not like staff, not like a janitor, but like the person standing between him and ruin. And for the first time that day, the truth was no longer hidden in the language. It was standing right in front of him. The storm outside had swallowed the city by nightfall. Rain slid down the glass walls of Ethan Caldwell's office in restless streams, turning Manhattan into a blur of white lights and shadows. Inside, the air felt still, heavy with everything that had changed in a single afternoon. Mark Reynolds had already called compliance, internal security, and the board. Daniel Mercer's access had been frozen. His office locked. His devices flagged. The machine had turned against one of its own. But Ethan remained by the window, silent, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. Ava Brooks stood near the conference table, the edge of her janitor badge catching the light. It felt absurd now, that badge. Like a costume from a life that no longer fit. Ethan turned from the glass and walked toward his desk. He opened the top drawer and pulled out a silver envelope. Thick. Clean. Heavy. He placed it on the desk between them. $1 million, he said. Ava looked at it but did not touch it. Ethan's voice stayed low. I said it in that boardroom like a joke. He exhaled. It is not a joke now. Ava stared at the envelope. Enough money to erase her debts. Her mother's hospital. Bills. Rent for years. A chance to breathe again. But something inside her stayed still. She looked up at Ethan. I did not do it for money. Ethan nodded once, like he expected that answer. I know. Ava looked at the envelope again, then gently pushed it back across the desk. Ethan frowned. You are turning down $1 million? Ava met his eyes. My father taught me something before he died. Her voice softened. Value and price are not the same thing. The room fell quiet. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, studying the woman he had almost dismissed as background noise. The storm tapped harder against the windows. Mark stood by the door, watching the exchange with a kind of disbelief that had not left him all evening. Ethan leaned against the desk, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Then tell me what you want. Ava hesitated. That question felt more dangerous than the money. Because the truth was, she had stopped asking herself what she wanted a long time ago. Survival had replaced ambition. Rent had replaced dreams. She looked around the office. The books. The city. The Empire. Then she answered honestly. To be seen for what I can do. Ethan looked down once, almost ashamed. Because that was the one thing he had failed to do from the start. He reached into his desk again and pulled out another folder, this one dark blue with the company seal stamped across the front. He slid it toward her. Ava opened it. Her breath caught. Offer of employment. Executive strategy consultant. Full salary. Full benefits. Immediate start. Ava blinked, staring at the page. You cannot be serious. Ethan's voice was steady. You read what my lawyers missed. You uncovered what my executives overlooked. You exposed betrayal inside my own walls. He stepped closer. That is not janitorial work. That is strategy. Ava looked at the offer, her hands still. For years, she had carried her education like a hidden weight, buried beneath uniforms and cleaning shifts. Now someone was placing it back into her hands. Mark smiled faintly, the first real smile all day. Honestly, he said, it is the smartest hire this company could make. Ava looked at Ethan. Why trust me? After only one day? Ethan gave a quiet breath. Because you protected my company when you had every reason to stay silent. The storm softened outside, rain slowing against the glass. Ava held the offer letter in her hands, the paper warm now from her grip. For the first time in years, the future no longer looked like a hallway she cleaned. It looked like a door opening. And this time, someone was holding it open for her. The next morning, Caldwell Dynamics looked the same from the outside. 42 floors of glass catching the pale New York sunrise, taxis flowing beneath it like yellow currents, the city already moving before most people had finished their first coffee. But inside, everything felt different. Ava Brooks stepped through the front lobby at 8:15 sharp, the polished marble shining beneath her shoes, the scent of espresso and fresh paper filling the air. For 3 years she had entered this building through the service entrance in the back alley, carrying cleaning supplies and keeping her head down. Today, for the first time, she walked through the front doors. The security guard at the desk looked up and smiled. Not the polite half-smile reserved for maintenance staff. A real one. Good morning, Miss Brooks. Ava paused for half a second, almost surprised the words were meant for her. She nodded and stepped toward the executive elevators, the blue employment folder tucked under her arm. No janitor cart. No mop. Just the folder and the weight of a life changing. Upstairs, the executive boardroom was already full. Mark Reynolds sat at the far end reviewing reports, his glasses low on his nose. 3 board members whispered over coffee. Compliance officers moved in and out with folders under their arms. Daniel Mercer's chair was empty. His nameplate removed before sunrise. The investigation had moved fast overnight. Ethan Caldwell stood by the windows, jacket off, tie loosened, looking like a man who had not slept but had finally seen clearly. When Ava entered, the room shifted. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Not because she was invisible anymore. Because now everyone knew exactly who she was. Ethan walked toward her and held out his hand. Ava looked at it for a moment, then shook it. Firm. Equal. Welcome to strategy, Ethan said. Mark gave her a small nod of respect. On the conference table, near the center seat, sat a polished black nameplate. Ava Brooks. Executive Strategy Consultant. The letters reflected the morning light. Ava stared at it, her chest tightening in a way she could not explain. It was only a piece of metal. But it weighed more than every unpaid bill, every overnight shift, every time someone looked past her like she was part of the furniture. Ethan noticed her looking at it. You earned that, he said quietly. Ava pulled out the chair and sat. The leather felt different today. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Around her, executives opened reports and legal summaries, but the room carried a new energy now. Sharper. More careful. Because one lesson had settled into every corner of the company overnight. Intelligence does not always wear a suit. Ethan placed the revised merger file in front of her. We rebuild from here, he said. Ava opened it, scanning the pages, her eyes moving with calm precision. Familiar now. Natural. Outside the window, the rain from the night before had cleared, leaving the city bright and clean under morning light. Ethan looked around the room, then back at Ava. For the first time in years, he began a meeting not by speaking first, but by listening. Ava turned the first page, her father's words echoing in the quiet spaces of her mind. People hide truth inside language because they think nobody will look closely. She almost smiled. The room settled. Pens clicked. Papers shifted. The city moved below them. And in the reflection of the glass, Ava saw it clearly at last. Not the janitor she had been. Not the invisible woman carrying debt and grief through silent hallways. But the person she had always been underneath it all. Seen. Heard. Finally in the right room. And this time, nobody was laughing.